The nonprofit TAT Foundation was created in 1973 to bring spiritual seekers and finders together. We publish books, videos, and a free online newsletter. We maintain a website of spiritual resources and hold 4 spiritual retreat weekends each year. Our goal is to offer practical guidance for following a spiritual path and living a spiritual life. For more information, go to tatfoundation.org. That's tatfoundation.org.
Thanks, Simon. It's wonderful to be here with old friends and meet new friends. Rose was incredibly high on friendship. There was a big thing with Rose. He said, friendship is the highest religion. And that's true. We all sense that to a certain degree. And it's probably that friendship that he expressed and exemplified that's responsible for TAT being able to not only continue but thrive without him. But also, beneath that is this desire to know the truth that we all have or we wouldn't be here. And it's that intense yearning, that longing for something that we know is there but we can't quite trust, can't quite taste. We can trust it, but we can't taste it, we can't feel it. And so we come to gatherings like this for that very reason. To perhaps set ourselves up for something that might happen that we've been hoping for and working for a long time. And I want to concentrate on that in the talk today. And I wrote out a couple of things because I wanted to get it right about what I wanted to say. I'm going to go on the assumption that everyone is here to one degree or another because they're interested in directly experiencing their true nature, their true self. Some of you may be at the beginning of stages of the curiosity about this. Others of you may have been beating your head against this wall for decades to the point of exhaustion and even defeat. But you're here anyway. Good for you. Then there are those of you who are actively and energetically pursuing this path pretty much full time. Everything in your life is grist for the mill. You are in too deep to turn back. You know the only way out is forward, and you desperately want to speed up the process by any means necessary. You are the ones I'm mainly speaking to here today. If you're relatively new to this or just here out of curiosity, I'm speaking to the part of you that knows you need to take the next step, no matter how uncomfortable that might be. If you're a weary, battle-scarred veteran of the Dharma Wars, I'm speaking to that part of you that was once on fire for ultimate truth and hopefully blowing on the embers. I want to preface things by saying, please don't take what I say as truth. I am merely trying to seed your mind with things to think about. All I've tried to do is bring a little organization and clarity to the myriad words and recommendations that come at seekers as we try to navigate these waters. Rose famously advised to turn over every rock, but as every seeker soon finds out, there's a hell of a lot of rocks out there. And under every rock, there's pebbles. And under every pebble are grains of sand. What we don't want to do is spend a lot of time with a pebble or a grain of sand when we may not be under a helpful rock. Life is short. We need to be efficient and discerning and spend our precious time on those things most likely to facilitate self-realization, if indeed that's what we're after. So, first of all, my apologies for doing a PowerPoint presentation. I know it's not very spiritual, but 30 years in IBM will do that to you. And and also there's a lot of little things that I figure, well, making lists and whatnot. And it's okay as far as I'm concerned if you ask questions while I'm going along. I know there's a separate session for that after this, but I don't mind questions if something's unclear or whatever. Where to start? Well, where are we? There's lots of ways that we could answer that question. We're here in West Virginia, we're at Claymont, we're in the United States of America, we're on the planet Earth, we're in a universe, and we have these different galaxies. We're in a certain galaxy and that sort of thing. But let's answer that question in a little bit of a different way. So I'm going to talk about four things that kind of will tell us where we are now, or a way of thinking about where we are now as a framework for going forward. Before the beginning, the primal cause, manifestation, and the perceiver experiencer. And these are a compilation of words that we run into. This is not a teaching. This is just, here's what we hear. How do we organize them? How do we put these things into some kind of a framework where we don't just get confused, where this word is pointing at that word and all these different vague things that we can't really get a handle on. And that's all I'm trying to do here today, is to try to get some sort of clarity and organization to all the myriad things that come at us when we're trying to do this. Before the beginning, we talk about void, absolute, emptiness, abyss. These are kind of synonyms or whatever, it doesn't matter. But what we're trying to point to with this kind of a terminology is, before there was something, there was nothing. I mean, that's implicit, that whether it can be experienced or not, we know that has to be true. That there was an emptiness, there was a void out of which things came. Why did they come out? Because there was a primal cause of some sort. Out of nothing, something. Why? What? We have a lot of words that attempt to point at that: source, creator, God, self, the I am, the Father, divine mother, demiurge, awareness, the one, true nature. All of these point at whatever power it was that out of nothingness brought somethingness. And it doesn't matter what the word is. It's just that concept that there was a primal cause. There was a source for all of this. Something made it happen. What happened? We got a manifestation. We have this. We call it creation, illusion, the matrix. There's a lot of very high people in high tech now that are high on the idea of this is a simulation. It's literally a computer simulation, a virtual reality game. And there's a lot of evidence for that. Maya, of course, is a word that turns up in Buddhist and Hindu traditions. Consciousness. I tend to talk about this creation as consciousness as opposed to awareness, which is source. Consciousness is the contents of awareness. Everythingness, the universe, the world, duality, polarity, this what we're immersed in, what we wake up to every morning, this manifestation. And then there's the perceiver, the experiencer. And we have a lot of words and concepts for that: the identity, ego, self, me, the body, mind, senses, the character actor, the role player, and in parentheses, the son. If we accept the terminology of the Father as the source, if we go with that metaphor, the Father is the source, then we are, this perceiver experiencer is the Son. It's in parentheses because we can't know that until we experience the Father. It's only intellectual speculation. Jesus says that we are, but we don't know that unless we experience the Father and we find out we are the Son. So the eternal quest, that's what brings us here. The Son seeks to know, these are different ways of talking about it, that's all these are. The Son seeks to know the Father. The creation seeks to know its creator. This was a big theme of Blade Runner. The Rutger Hauer character is in pursuit of finding out who the creator is. Who made me? Who gave me a certain lifespan? What am I? Am I alive? Am I not? The creation seeks to know its creator. This is in us. We can't help it. It's just in us. The projection, if you talk about this as a projection, we want to know the source of the projection. Where's the light, the camera that's projecting all of this? The illusory self seeks to know its true nature. The deluded one seeks to know enlightenment. The ignorant one wants knowledge. It is the nature of man to seek truth. And we feel that. We all feel that. You know, in small ways, we always want to know the truth. And we want to know the truth about ourselves. We want to know the truth about the world. We want to know the truth about ourselves. But there's a problem. When it comes to ultimate truth, it's not under our control. Perception of truth, we can't, no matter how hard we try, it's not under our control. And there's a lot of words that I put down here for things that sort of reflect that. Rose's quote, "There's no recipe for a lightning bolt." Jesus says, "All who come to the Father come through me." In other words, you can't do it on your own. You're coming through me, or you ain't getting there. There's the concept of the Holy Spirit, the great intercessor. You hear people talk about who have had realizations. They say, "I had help. At this certain point, I had help." What was that help? And without that help, it wouldn't have happened. I had help. The Holy Spirit, the great intercessor. The song, Amazing Grace, the concept of grace, this grace that saved a wretch like me. Doesn't matter, in this case, the man who wrote that song was a slave trader, so he was a wretch, but we're all wretches, and we can't save ourselves. Only grace can save us. And the concept of salvation, deliverance, redemption, all of which points to the fact that it's not us, we can't do it. An outside force of some kind has to do it for us. And of course, Rose, another famous Rose quote, "Enlightenment is always an accident." But there are ways to become accident prone. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. And this by no means is something that you want to hang your hat on. This is just me talking about it in a certain way. There are many, many, many ways to talk about this. But this is one way that I can kind of gather some thoughts together, give you some things to think about, and put a little bit of organization to the things that come at us as seekers. And I put it into these categories: the Four Cornerstones, the 5 strategies, the 6 habits, the 7 resolves, and the 8 side effects. And these are all pointing towards what can we do to become more vulnerable to grace, to become accident prone. First cornerstone, and these are not none of these things are in order. I didn't number them on purpose. They're bulleted instead of numbered because there's no priority. But if I was going to give a priority to one of the cornerstones, it would be prayer. And by that, I just mean an open line of communication 24/7 to whatever you consider as a higher power. It's not Christian prayer. It's not anything else like that. For a lot of us, the word prayer has been a 4-letter word for most of our lives. It's get down on your knees and pray for your ANEM or whatever. Fuck that. That's not it. This is, you want to be in communication with some kind of higher power. We know, or we've just talked about the fact that it's not up to us. We can't do it. I can't do it. I need help. Help from what? Some kind of a higher power that can do it. Whatever kind of word we put to that. The great intercessor, whatever. Pray for help. And I think I could turn this computer off and stop right here, and it would be enough. Ask and you shall receive. Knock and it shall be opened. This is all you need. But it's too hard. It's too hard to do just this. We have to do more. We feel we have to do more. And there is more that can be done. But this is the core. If you're not constantly asking for this, your life is showing that it's not your priority. And this higher power, it says, I can wait. Let me know when you're ready. And when you're ready and you ask for it, and you ask for it in the right way, hang on to your hat, because you'll get it. Self-inquiry. This is a natural instinct. I hear a lot of people, they say, I don't know how to do self-inquiry. Well, it's a natural instinct. We all want to know who we are. And these are just some little notes to myself here, but little magazine quizzes, that you answer 10 questions and it tells you something about yourself. People love that. They tell me something about myself. Astrology, tell me about myself. This is my sign. So that's what I'm like. Oh, that's interesting. Facebook quizzes, you see. What kind of flower are you? And they take the test, and it tells you what kind of flower you are, and they're so proud of it, they post it, I'm a daylily. Ooh, and the Enneagram is another thing that people go to find out about themselves. These are things that have been well set up. A chief feature, Gurdjieff's chief feature, that we all have a chief feature, and we're very interested in knowing what that is. There's something out there now, human design, which is a kind of a spin-off of astrology in the sense that you tell them your birthday and where you were born, and they'll tell you something about yourself. But these are all external mechanisms by which we seek to have somebody else tell us who we are. But that's not really what we're up to here. We want to find out for ourselves who we are. So self-observation, self-honesty, self-inquiry, that we just do ourselves. Me to me, me to the higher power, who am I? Who or what am I? That's the crux of self-inquiry. We have the impetus naturally to want to know ourselves. But what's the best way? And is it enough to know that you're a daylily, or do you need to go deeper? I actually created what I call the identity attributes matrix, which has 38 or 40 different human characteristics. And my idea was that for each of those, you think about it very, very hard and rate yourself 1 to 100 on it. And the point isn't what your score is. The point is how hard you have to think, whether you're a 58 or a 62. You have to think about these things. How audacious am I? How humble am I? How generous am I? So it's a way of getting in there and identifying things about yourself. Now, that's what I call small s self-inquiry. That's who is this character, who is this perceiver that we talked about earlier. And that's the small self-inquiry. The big S self-inquiry is, who am I really? And then's when you ask the big questions. What's really going on here? Who or what am I? And that's the capital S self-inquiry that we need to do when we're in the business of trying to find out what the truth is. In the end, of course, you find out that you're everything but what you thought you were. And no matter how much self-inquiry you do, what you're defining is what you are not. Inner silence is another cornerstone. Now, there's lots of ways to court that, to get at it. Of course, meditation is a popular way. There's so many different kinds of meditation. Rose, for instance, said meditation is productive thinking. So I would take that productive thinking meditation and I would put that in the category of self-inquiry. And in self-inquiry, another way to facilitate that is to keep a journal. I used to call mine a self-inquiry journal. That's what I did in my journal. I would ask my highest and best questions I could and then wait and see what my pen wrote next. Answer, maybe it answered it, maybe it would say something, and the next thing I wrote would say, well, that's bullshit. And I try again. But do your self-inquiry in writing, and you can watch it, and if you see yourself writing something that's not true, that's a lot easier to spot than if it's just going through your mind in one segment and out the other without any real being able to look at it. But productive thinking is self-inquiry. What I talk about with inner silence is, it's no thought. That's the ideal, where there's no chatter going on. And why is this important? Well, silence is the medium of transmission. If something comes, it's going to come in silence. And the more comfortable you are with that, the more that you have put yourself in that position, the more likely that you will be available for the kind of communication you're asking for. Physical silence can help with this. Like, for instance, being above the tree line, where there really is no noise from the world. It can help with that. It can facilitate inner silence. And the last one is betweenness, which is a popular topic that people ask me a lot about. Betweenness is a way of holding your head. It's so difficult to talk about and so difficult to quantify, but I keep giving it a try here and there. And why do I think it's so important? Because I think that in a state of betweenness, you are accident prone. You are vulnerable to grace in a state of betweenness. It's very hard to get there. But if you can do that, if you can walk the razor's edge of betweenness, you are in a very vulnerable position to having an intervention of a beneficial nature. I sometimes call it where desire meets surrender. The theory or the principle is you have a very powerful desire, a very strong intention. In this case, we're talking about self-realization, knowing true nature, discovering true nature. You have a very strong intention in that regard. You let that be known to the higher power. You communicate that in every way possible with words and actions, that this is what I want. And you want it very, very badly. You want it at all costs. Preferably you want it no matter what. I don't care if it drives me crazy. I don't care if it makes me homeless, penniless. Doesn't matter. This is all I want. And you make that very, very clear. And at the same time, you have faith or confidence that it can happen. I mean, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you say, this is what I want at all costs, but you know what? I'm not worthy. I haven't done enough work. I'm not the guy for this. It's probably never going to happen. So that's not beneficial. You have a powerful desire, confidence or faith that it can happen and that it will happen. And that gives you the grounding. That right there is the core of it. But then I start talking about, a couple of other nuances. One is, at the same time, if you can do it, be totally grateful for things just as they are right now before you get your powerful desire fulfilled. But in other words, you're saying to the higher power, I want this at all costs, but you know what? I'm totally grateful for what I have right now. Thank you very much. This brings a feeling of surrender, a feeling of what I call indifference as to whether you ever get what you want or not. So you're essentially saying, thy will, not mine, O Lord. This is what I want. But if you don't want it for me, I'm fine with that. As a matter of fact, I don't even want it. If you don't want it for me, I take it all back. Total indifference to it. This is Christ in Gethsemane. It says Abba, which is a familial name for father, like Papa or Daddy. Abba, to you all things are possible. If it be thy will, take this cup from my lips. But if it's not your will and I must drink it, thy will be done. Then we get out of this core, what I think is the core of this seeking that I would be talking about, the four cornerstones. That's the power. That's the nuclear reactor. If you're not doing that, then a lot of what else you're doing is secondary to the point of possibly not being relevant. So, but we'll get into what can be done. What can you do more or less externally? Now we've talked about the internals, the internal engine. What can you do externally that might facilitate a speeding up or that might prove fruitful in this endeavor? And some of these will be familiar, some of them might surprise you. But of course, absorbing the teachings, from everywhere, teachers, books, videos, wherever you can get it. What's out there already? What's been written about this? Who's saying what about it? Does it resonate with me? And you're doing your research. You're doing your due diligence. You have to do that. I mean, sometimes, realization will happen to people who aren't necessarily even looking for it sometimes. But that's not prescriptive. Somebody that wants to do it but isn't having it happen to them in their normal life, like for instance Norio. Norio was not on a definite path. He had questions, which is why it probably happened. He had questions that could only be answered by a direct experience of the answer. Couldn't be answered intellectually. Could only be answered by a direct experience. Those are the kind of questions you want to hold in your head. Those are the kind of questions you want to ask. What's really going on here? Who or what am I really? There's no intellectual answer to that. It has to be a direct experience of that in order to be satisfied with it. So those are the kind of questions we need to ask. But as we're trying to do this on purpose, when you're talking about, well, if you're just starting from scratch, or if you're just coming out of nowhere and you're not getting any help, and you think this is something you want to do and you want to do it on purpose, what's prescriptive? I mean, some people wake up after hitting bottom as an alcoholic, but that's not prescriptive. That's not a good strategy to pass on to people. So what is a good strategy to pass on to people? There's some tried and true things that you can put out there and some other things that you can kind of play with. But I think it's important to have some sort of a strategy, rather than just flying by the seat of your pants. What am I really doing here? Where is my time best spent? If this is what I want, and I only have X number of years, and we don't know how many of those are. For me, it theoretically is a lot fewer than for somebody in here that's 25 years old, but you don't know. I might live to 93, and the 25-year-old might live to 27. You don't know how many years you have left. So you got to spend them wisely. And also I would add that you absorb these teachings, what's out there. You take them, you internalize them, you chew them up, and then you spit them out. Don't believe them, because it's not yours. You don't know these things for yourself, so they are not yours. Until you know them for yourself, they are not yours. So you do the research, you take it into account for everything else that you're doing, but don't believe anything. If you get trapped into belief, you're dead in the water. Then you're creating a paradigm within which you expect truth to fit itself, and it will not do that. Don't create a paradigm of belief that you expect truth to adhere to. It won't do it. It has to be wide open. In connection with, it's sort of separate, but sort of in connection with absorbing the teachings, assume authority for this entire enterprise. Being a disciple is easy. You go and you sit at the feet of the master and you hope like hell he zaps you somewhere along the way. That's easy. You're not assuming authority. My recommendation is you assume authority for this. Take charge. You're the final say on whether these teachings that you're reading and the things that these teachers are saying, you're the final authority on whether they have relevance or not. Now, you might think, well, I'm not up to that, but you are. You're the final authority. If it doesn't resonate with you, set it aside. Maybe later it will resonate with you, and then it'll come back. I can't tell you how many people have told me that, the first time I read I Am That, I couldn't make head nor tails of it. So you set it aside. I came back 5 years later and read it, and it hit me right between the eyes. You weren't ready for it. Then later you're ready for it. But you're the one that says what resonates and what doesn't resonate. Assume responsibility, assume authority. It's a kind of a weight. They say, really? It's up to me? Little me? I'm not worthy. You are. You have to be the authority. Don't be a disciple. Question everything. This is really important and gets down to the belief thing and everything else, but don't believe anything, question everything. And that's on the spiritual level, on the relative level of the relative truth of creation, that sort of thing. Rose was big on this too. The cover of the Albigen Papers, he's got a drawing here that's may or may not, clear enough, but he's got a four-headed snake. And the heads of the snake are church, law, education, and government. In other words, don't trust any of those. Now, I would add to that some other things, especially now as they're coming to light. And there's a lot of light coming into the manifestation now. And I would add some more heads to that snake, like central banking, medicine, big pharma, multinational corporations, big tech, mainstream media, Hollywood, science, history. Everything we have been told is a lie. Go on that assumption and question everything. And my belief is that right now especially, it's a powerful tool on the search for self-realization. I've met a lot of people who are focused only on relative truth that I think are closer to self-realization than a lot of people I meet that are only focused on what they call spiritual work. There's going to be this convergence. Truth is truth. If you're not interested in the relative truth of the manifestation, you don't have a lot of hope for ultimate truth. I know a lot of people that reject talk about the relative truth of what's going on in the manifestation is not spiritual. Well, why are you talking about that? It's not spiritual. Yes, it is. Everything is. There's even, the terminology is even starting to come around to that. The word woke is being used for people that have awakened to relative truth, that know they're being lied to by everything and everybody that's in power. And that's called being woke. And being woke is a big step towards being awake. Once you start seeing truth, you start seeing truth everywhere, and you set yourself up for the big T truth. So question everything. Everything you've been taught is a lie. I mean, literally everything. The history books are wrong. They're intentionally wrong. Question everything. Don't accept anything at all. And you're going to be a lot closer to every kind of truth there is. Focus intent. And we talked a little bit about this in the Cornerstones, but we want lots of things in life. We have a Christmas list of things we want. And on that list, of course, is self-realization for those of us in here. But we also want a lot of other things. We want $15 million. We want, the best lover we can possibly get, and a big house, or whatever we want. New car. We have this big list of things that we want in life: success, fame, acclamation, and we're putting that out there constantly. And the divine says, well, I'm doing the best I can. I really want the best for you. What you want, I want for you. But a lot of these things that you're telling me you want in various different ways, they're in conflict with each other. There's some of them that I know are not good for you. You think you want them, but they wouldn't be good for you. You don't really want them, and I would hate to give them to you. But if I'm going to try to do my best, but with all these different things, all these different conflicting things, it's going to take me a long time to pull this all together. And maybe you don't have that much time. But if you only want one thing, that I can give you right now. So if you can focus your intent on self-realization at the expense of everything else that might be on your Christmas list. See, this is all I want. And I want it at all costs. You're putting yourself in a very good position. Now, getting back a little bit to some of the cornerstones, I've just made this little thing. I don't know if you can see it. Everything's so pale here, but actually these arrows should be double arrows, but PowerPoint didn't give me that option. But this is just kind of showing what I think is the key relationship of the inner work that we're doing. The relationship between prayer, intent, what we were just talking about, this powerful and one-pointed intent, and betweenness. So you have this powerful intent, it's input to betweenness, and you're praying for the powerful intent, and at the same time you're saying to that which you're praying to, but if it's not your will, thy will be done. And this is where the power lies, right there in that Trinity. This is what I want. I want to tell you how much I want it, but if you don't want it for me, then I don't even want it. If you can hold on to that and if what you want is self-realization, then hang on to your hat. Things are going to move fast. Whoops. And the last strategy that I think is beneficial is to, in some way, get comfortable with the idea of your physical death. Befriend death. Why? Well, because going into a realization is going to feel like death. And if you have a physical fear of death, and this starts to feel like death, because after all, it's the absence of everything you ever thought you were goes away. What are we going to call that? The unprepared mind has only one reference point for that. It's death. And if we're afraid of physical death, we're going to dig in our heels. And a lot of people, maybe some people in here, have had the experience of, I was right there, but I was afraid, and it aborted. It didn't happen. But if you're not afraid, if you've come to some sort of an accommodation or a friendship with death, then it's smooth sailing at that critical point where it could stop because of your fear. And it will stop because of fear. Fear will stop everything, anything. But if you're at a point of comfort and friendship with death, then should that happen, should you arrive at the point where this is coming upon you, it'll keep going. So I think it's important. I have one of the poems in the little book I have back there is, the multitudes fear death and try not to think about it. When it approaches, panic ensues. The sage sees death as the companion of life. He holds it in high regard and treats it like a childhood friend. Death inhabits his thoughts. Death informs his actions. Death walks at his side. When deciding what's worth doing, he asks the advice of death. Now we get past the first two, the Four Cornerstones, the 5 strategies, I think is where most of the power lies in this enterprise. But from here, there's things that can contribute, maybe, maybe not. But why not? Why not try to streamline the rest of your life as much as possible to facilitate an experience? And these habits they're just sort of ways of being with yourself in the world that may or may not help. But I think they're worth mentioning, and sometimes these things, both the habits and the resolves, get told to us as things we should focus on. And so part of the reason that I'm organizing it like this is to say, yes, these things are important, but they're not the most important. Don't spend too much time with this. Keep it in mind, take it under advisement, incorporate it into your life, and yet understand that if you're not doing the core inner work, then some of these other things aren't going to get you there. So authenticity, what the old somebody said, be what you is, not what you ain't, because if you ain't what you is what you ain't. Be authentic and be who you are. Don't be afraid of being who you are. We're told, from TV and peers and society and parents and teachers, how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act, and then our inner self tells us, well, if you behave like you really are, people won't like you, so you better be something else. You better be more like somebody else than who you are. But just fearlessly be who you are in life. And there's a certain magic in that, and it dovetails into some of the other things we've talked about as well. Empathy. Empathy is not compassion. Empathy is the capacity to feel what someone else is feeling. And that it may be able to feel what a very evil person is feeling. You can empathize with, you can feel what's going on with someone else. whether they're in a good place or a bad place. You can feel it. In other words, the barrier is down between I and you. Whoops, excuse me. And the barrier is down and I can feel what you're feeling. You can feel what I'm feeling. That's empathy. Now, it can be used for things that could be described as, good deeds. If you empathize with someone, then you maybe will give them what they need. Maybe you will help them out in the way that they need to be helped out. But it's also very powerful as a tool in self-inquiry and self-realization. Because everything that you discover about someone else is true about you. And everything that you know about yourself is true of everyone else. Now, maybe the percentage of mix is different for everyone, obviously, but you've got a certain percentage of Hitler in you. You've got a certain percentage of Jesus in you. And everybody is your teacher. But they can't teach you anything if you can't go where they are, if you can't be where they are, if you can't be them for a few minutes. They can't teach you. There's too big a barrier. You're in this cocoon of self. But if that cocoon of self isn't there, and you can be in the same space with someone else, there's infinite amount of things that you can take from that. You can learn about yourself, you can help other people that way. And so being empathetic, I think, is a quality that can serve us well. Forgiveness, there's a lot to say about that as well. I'll start by saying that it's the opposite of being a victim. So much of the way people feel about the things that happen to them in their lives, that, well, this person did that to me, and it's their fault that this is where I am in life now, and I can never forgive her for doing this, and I can never forgive him for cheating me the way he did. And that doesn't hurt the other person. They've long forgotten about you. You're harboring this poison of, I need to take revenge, or I'm a victim. And until I get satisfaction on my victimhood, I'll never be at peace. Who needs that? So forgiveness doesn't have anything to do with the other person. You don't have to ever let them know. But it's a way of being in life that, it's responsibility too. Yeah, this happened. That person acted in a way that's, not probably the best way to be in life, but and I got set back in my life because of it. But okay, that's the way it went. That's what was supposed to happen, and I forgive them. And we can even do that with name brand evil people that are in the news or in history or whatever. This was I'll use the word soul. This was a soul that got born into a body and a circumstance it had no control over whatsoever, and had no more control over how that life went than you had control over how your life went. How can you not forgive them for what happens? There's, I think, it can't be researched because this is, so intimate, but if you could get inside someone's head and really understand them, and see what they had been through in their life, you would be absolutely amazed that they did as well as they did. How did you ever get through that to be even this level of asshole? I would have expected you to be that level of asshole, for what you had to go through. I probably wouldn't have done as well. So just a posture of forgiveness for everything. Don't take offense. Even our language tells us, don't take offense. People can try to give offense, but you don't have to take it. Don't take offense. No matter how much is offered, don't take it. Gratitude. It's almost self-explanatory, but if you have a habit of gratitude, more will come to you. It's a very selfish thing to be grateful. As a parent, and many people in here are parents, if you have a child that thanks you for everything, I'm like, oh, thank you so much, this is just what I wanted, or oh, thank you for taking me to my game today, or whatever, then you just want to do more. And then you got the other child that never is satisfied, I wanted a blue one. You're not as likely to want to satisfy that child's desires. Or it doesn't have to be your child, but it's a stranger. If someone's grateful for the smallest thing that you give them, in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you offer me, a leaf, a piece of dirt, a drop of water, I will accept it in love. Every little thing the divine is grateful for. Should we do less? Forbearance. I started out with patience here. And I upgraded it to forbearance because I like the word and it seems to have much more context, much more weight. It has patience is a part of it, but there's a stoicism and an acceptance with strength. It's like, I got options. I could react in a different way, but I have forbearance and I'm going to forego. I'm going to just be patient with strength. You're biding your time. You have options, and you're not a victim. Whatever occurs in your life, if you have forbearance, you're going to get through it, and you're going to be stronger on the other side of it. Simplicity. I had so many little notes to myself, I'm going to have a different quote. Simplicity. Y'all are probably familiar with Occam's razor, what they call Occam's razor, which is the philosophy that barring overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the simplest answer is always true. Barring overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the simplest answer is always true. My own personal little experience that I keep in mind about that brings that home for me. In one of my tries at college, I was an art major, and I was taking a class in color theory. And what we were given at the beginning of the class was this package of clay-coated paper with different shades. I think it was 200 or 300 of them. Very subtle different shades of colors. And our projects, this is how we did our projects. We would use these, cut them out, make different pictures or whatever, that express different color theories and that sort of thing. And there was like literally 200 or 300 of them. And at the beginning of the semester, the teacher says, I have an assignment for you, and I'm not going to ask for the results until the end of the semester. And if you get it right, you get an A no matter how the rest of the semester went for you. And here's the assignment. And he says, in that pack, there are 3 of those that if you put them together, they fulfill these requirements. And there was a list of like 10 or 12 different things. This will do this, and this will do this. And God, they're long lost to me, but there was these very specific things that would be true of these 3 colors when they were put together. So I'm giving you the whole semester because there's a lot of pieces of paper in there. Being a sort of a lazy guy, and I'm not giving myself much credit or anything, but I was the only one that got it right, and I spent almost no time with it because instinctively I did an Occam's razor. Instead of trying to do all this stuff, and at the end of the semester, everybody puts their solution up on the board. And there was only one correct answer, and it was mine. And you probably have guessed what it is. It's the primary colors. Red, blue, and yellow. And that's so simple. You don't need a semester. You don't need 300 of them. But the problem was presented in such a complex way, nobody could get past the complexity to the simplicity of it. The laziest, most simple answer was correct. There's what's called natural law. Natural law just circumvents all the other kinds of law that there might be on the books. It's basically do whatever you want if it doesn't hurt anybody else. If it doesn't keep other people from doing what they want. There's this core that we all know of how a human being should act with other human beings. And it's called natural law. And you don't need a library of law books to know natural law. It's very simple. It's the golden rule. It's the non-aggression principle. And so that's very simple. Rose used to talk about getting your house in order. That's another level of simplicity. Hemingway had a short story, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. So I like the phrase for myself, a clean, well-ordered life. If your life is simple, if your life isn't full of clutter, if your head isn't full of clutter, if there's simplicity and order in your life, you've given yourself a platform for clear thinking. Simplicity in life gives you a platform for doing greater things. Whereas if you're mired in the details of the clutter of your thinking and of your life, you don't have that platform for clear thinking and for going to greater heights. And as a couple of quotes here, Rose said, excuse me while I recover from tearing up. Rose said, oh, thank you, bless your heart. Truth is simple, the mind of man is complex. Truth is simple, the mind of man is complex. And as some of you know, before the occurrence that changed my life, I was at a workshop with Douglas Harding. And as I was saying goodbye to him, everybody else had left. My plane wasn't until the next day. And so, I kind of had him to myself and we had a wonderful conversation. He's a wonderful guy. And he's just this kind old guy and we're having this wonderful conversation like, we knew each other for 50 years. And then all of a sudden he kind of comes up out of his wheelchair and goes, "Simplify!" I literally staggered back to my room. And whether the content of that did it or not, I didn't think about what it meant to simplify. But the power of how he said it and that word has obviously stuck with me. And the next day, realization happened. So simplify! All right, the 7 resolves. We're getting more down into things that aren't quite as important, but why not keep them in mind? Stay healthy and strong. I love the Rose quote. I think it's on Mr. Rose, the tape, Mr. Rose. You're going to pass through death, so you'll need some vitality. And just, live long enough to have this happen. Stay healthy and strong and stick around as long as you can, because you don't know how long this might take. There again, it's not something this is no place to get stuck. You're not going to vegan your way to self-realization. You're not going to yoga your way to self-realization, but these are good things, to keep your body healthy and strong. If you're sick, if you're dealing with an illness, if you feel bad, even just if you got a stomach ache, you can't do shit. You're out of the game. So, stay healthy and strong if you can. Connect with the natural world. Nature has so much to teach us, and there's lots of ways to do that. I don't need to talk about it, but it's not just connection with outdoor adventure sports, which of course is one way to do it, but in a sense that insulates you from the thing itself, because you're doing something else. But just literally, I hate to say it like this, but be with a flower, be with a tree, connect, be mesmerized by what a butterfly is doing on a flower. Just empathize with nature. Empathize with nature like you would empathize with another person. There's lots to be learned there. do no harm. This is big in a lot of traditions, obviously, nonviolence and everything, but it just makes sense. You can't go around doing harm to others or animals or anything, and be in a position for truth to come into your life. Be a friend. Here again, Rose. I think he's even answered some people's questions sometimes. As Mr. Rose, I don't know what to do, when people come to my group. Be a friend. I don't know what to do when I'm going to meet this other person, and I don't know what they're going to ask of me. Be a friend. You can never go wrong. Pursue right livelihood. There's a lot of ways to do this. I mean, this doesn't mean that you have to, be an artist if you've always wanted to be an artist, or do something special in any way. But at least, earn your living in a karma neutral way. And that can be with major corporations or anything else. It doesn't have to be in some very spiritual kind of thing. You don't have to be a yoga teacher or something like that to pursue right livelihood. If you're in a corporate environment and you think you might not want to be there, or you shouldn't be there, or it's not right for you, you don't know why you're there in a lot of ways. You might be there for other people. Your presence there might be, a very good thing for others. You don't know why you're there, but if it's a karma neutral job, that doesn't matter. It's not hurting you a bit in your pursuit of self-realization to work at a job that maybe you think isn't quite right for your inner satisfaction. That's not the point, really. But if you're working for a karma negative job, something that cheats people or hurts people or is based on a principle that is wrong, that's going to hold you back. You can't be a shyster and say that you want truth or expect to have truth come into your life. Except, of course, by an act of grace. You can be a slave trader, and an act of grace can intervene. But there again, that's not prescriptive. You don't tell somebody that if you want to be self-realized, first be a slave trader. Act with integrity. Another no-brainer. Speak the truth. Be a man of your word. Interact with others with honesty and fairness. Be self-sufficient. There's a couple of different aspects to this I want to talk about. One is being self-sufficient in and of yourself. In other words, don't be needy. For instance, if you're in a relationship, you can be totally in love with someone else and be self-sufficient. And as a matter of fact, it's better. If you're needy, if you're in a relationship because you feel that person is filling a hole that you have in yourself, you're not self-sufficient, that you're needy in some way, and you need that other person to fill this emptiness that you have, then that's not good. Be self-sufficient. A step above that is being what I call self-affirmed, where you need the opinions of others don't matter to you. You don't care what anybody else thinks. You're totally self-affirmed. Rose, again, was a wonderful example of that. It's a silly example, but he mispronounced a lot of words, and dinosaurs for dinosaurs, ego for ego, Colorado for Colorado. They were endless. But it didn't matter if there was 50 people around him saying ego. When he said it, it was ego. He was never swayed. He was totally self-affirmed. Regardless of your opinion of Trump is totally self-affirmed. Whatever goes on around him does not affect him, not at all. And whatever you think of Trump, that's a good quality. Another person I point to, one of my favorite people that's ever taken a body on this planet, is Muhammad Ali. Completely self-affirmed. If you've never seen the documentary When We Were Kings, I would recommend you see it. It's actually on my list of films that I think are efficacious for spiritual seekers. And it's a documentary of a fight that Muhammad Ali had with George Foreman in Zaire in Africa many years ago in the 70s. And Ali is at the end of his career, almost 40. George Foreman is a 21-year-old behemoth who not only defeats every opponent, he destroys them. You know, in the first or second round, they're not only out cold, they get carried out on the stretcher. And this guy is, you know, he's got arms like my legs. He's just, you know, this powerhouse. And everybody is telling Ali, don't do it. Don't. His own manager says, Muhammad, you know, not only are you going to lose, he might kill you. I'm serious, don't do it. So he does it. Everybody's telling him he's going to lose. Everybody's telling him he's crazy. And he goes to Zaire, he trains, he's totally self-affirmed about it. He gets crowds together and has them cheering for him. Mahi Ali Kumbaya, Ali Kumbaya. So he gets everybody cheering for him. You know, one man alone, he's doing this. And then the fight gets postponed. He gets all this built up. The fight gets postponed because Foreman gets a small cut during a training session. So he's 6 weeks, it's postponed. They got to stay in Africa. The momentum, all the air's gone out of the balloon. The momentum has gone down. Ali's just saying, he's still going to get his whooping. We'll just wait. He's still going to get his whooping. And I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but I might anyway. But you know where this is going. You know, they get in the ring, and it goes just like everybody thinks it's going to go. Foreman is just destroying him. Ali's against the ropes, totally defensive, round after round. The announcers are saying, when are they going to throw in the towel before he kills him? You know, round after round. Meanwhile, we don't know this because we can't hear it, but Ali's going, that all you got, George? Can't you hit no harder than that? And he rope-a-doped him, wore him out. Foreman had never been past 3 rounds before. And then at some point, Ali said, all right, here we are. He steps out, starts swinging, knocks him out. Not only knocks him out, it's just beautiful. You know, Foreman is just kind of spiraling down to the canvas. And Ali's standing over him. And anybody else would have thrown another punch to seal the deal. But the poetry of that fall, he was not going to interrupt. Down goes Foreman, out like a light. There's a lesson in there for seekers. There's a lesson in there for seekers. Also about self-sufficiency, I'll just throw this in. We're in a very precarious place in the world right now, and just in relative terms. And it doesn't hurt to think about being self-sufficient in your life. You know, literally preparing for some sort of an interruption of your normal life. You don't have to be a full-fledged prepper, but just keep in mind that there are things on the horizon that could come to fruition that could severely interrupt our lives. And so just keep in mind that it might be better to have a little bit of property away from, you know, if you're, right now I would say the worst place to be would be in a big city living paycheck to paycheck. You have no buffer. You're not self-sufficient in any way. You're totally dependent on the system, and the system is not that reliable right now. I mean, I'll throw out some stuff later, but, or no, I guess I won't either, but very quietly, Trump signed an executive order, an all-government order to prepare for an electromagnetic attack, which would shut down the entire electrical grid, whether it's natural or man-made. And there is weaponry out there that can do that. And so that would be a big thing. Venezuela is without power for a different reason, but that's another cautionary tale, what's happening in Venezuela. They've been in the dark for, I don't know if they're back now, but weeks. But you know, if there was an EMP attack, probably only 10% of the planet would survive. a complete shutdown of the country would survive a complete shutdown of the power. Now, I'm not saying anything like that's going to happen, but those sorts of things are coming into the consciousness now. And I think we would be remiss not to notice that more and more things like that are coming into the conversation and coming into the consciousness. And to, well, just take it under advisement, be self-sufficient in your personal life. Okay, the 8 side effects. Now we're really into things that you don't want. I don't think you need to go directly at. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm putting them in this category. Because sometimes these are things that are recommended to do as practices on the path. And I consider them side effects that come by doing these other things that we've talked about. And that it's not something that you can go directly at. You don't have the leverage to go at these things directly. And one of them is clarity. Many teachers will say, just see that you are this awareness. Well, how do I just see it? Am I going to just conjure it up, and squint my eyes really hard? Clarity doesn't come from focusing on clarity. Clarity comes in other ways. Compassion is another one. You can't make a job out of it. Compassion arises organically, or it doesn't. If you try to be compassionate, you're just play acting. You're doing things that might look compassionate on a videotape of you, but compassion itself has to arise organically. It's either there or it isn't. And so, Buddhism is big on this. The Dalai Lama, it's basically his only teaching. Be compassionate. But it either arises or it doesn't. You can be kind and you can do nice things for people, but you can't make yourself compassionate. But by doing some of these other things and pursuing a path like this, compassion can come as a side effect. Same with humility. Humility is not something you try to do. It just will come by doing other things, by interacting with other people, by feeling them, by being empathetic with people, and realizing that you are no better than anyone else, they're no better than you. And there's a natural humility that arises. You can't try to conjure this up. I need to be more humble. That may not even be a good thing. It's not always good to be humble. You're doing yourself a much bigger favor sometimes to be very assertive. So if you're trying to say, oh, well, that wasn't a very humble thing for me to do, that might have been the best thing. Love. All you need is love. You can't go directly at it. You can't make yourself feel love. Try it. It either comes or it doesn't. It's either there or it isn't. It's not a practice. It's a side effect of a way of living, a side effect of a way of being. It's a side effect of who you are. It's not a practice. Intuition. Intuition comes in a lot of ways, and it's a wonderful thing to have. And you can do some things that might help you hone intuition. But here again, it's a side effect of doing other things. It's a side effect of experimenting, being with people, empathizing with people, being able to see into people and into situations by virtue of the fact that you are immersing yourself and you're doing these other kinds of research things and pursuing other things on the path. And slowly but surely, because you've seen this so many different times or you've seen it in so many different ways, you have an intuition about the next thing that comes up that's sort of like that. Right away, oh no, that's wrong. He's not right. My intuition tells me that's not something I should do. But you can't make yourself intuitive. You either are or you aren't. But here again, you can do things and you can live your life in such a way that you accumulate the experience that allows you to naturally be intuitive. Selflessness, you either are or you aren't. Here's something that you can act in selfless ways, and that's a wonderful thing to do, but it's not a path. Working in a food bank is not going to get you enlightened. Giving away money to the homeless is not going to get you enlightened. These are wonderful things, but acting in a selfless manner is not a direct, does not have a direct effect on whether or not truth visits you. Amazement, I love this. After realization, you are amazed at everything. Absolutely everything is just a joy to behold, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're just amazed that this is here at all. Not just that it's here at all, but it's so beautiful and so complex and so varied and rich and textured, and you're just in awe of existence. But you can't make yourself that way. You can't get up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to be amazed at the world today. But you can put yourself in a position where amazement comes upon you. And when it does, you just hope it never leaves. There's no better way to be. Courage. Here again, there's possibly things that you can do to raise your level of courage, but basically it comes from doing other things. Failing, facing fears, and all these other little ways. You can't set out to become more courageous, but it is a very valuable attribute on the path. And another little, just to end, another little poem out of my book. A fearful man is defeated by fear. A courageous man acts in spite of it. Without fear, courage cannot arise. What use is courage to the fearless? The cause of fear is the unknown. Unknown outcomes, unknown realms. Death is the great unknown. The truth is also unknown, therefore it is feared. To seek truth in earnest takes courage. The way will pass through death. The one who seeks it will not survive. On this, the great masters are unanimous. That's it. Anybody got any questions?
You talked about the importance of relative truth, and then you mentioned being self-affirmed is something like saying ego instead of ego. You know, how do you put together accuracy and relative truth?
Accuracy?
Well, if it's correctly pronounced ego, what's the difference between being self-affirmed and self-absorbed?
That's you're looking at something that wasn't in there. That's not important. Whether you pronounce the word right or not is not important. Whether it's an accurate pronunciation, that's not important. The only important thing in that story is the fact that Rose didn't give a shit.
We got that, but then you said also the importance of relative truth.
Oh well, that's not in the ballpark of relative truth. That's such a minutia. Don't worry about that. The relative truth has nothing to do with the correct pronunciation of a word. Relative truth has to do with what is really going on in the world. Have you been red-pilled or not? You know, do you see what's going on in the world or not, Neo? You know, did you take the red pill or the blue pill? Do you see relative truth or not? I mean, the big, big, big relative truth. Not the little shit doesn't matter. You know, that just changes all the time.
This is kind of like about that, but more kind of different. So, yeah, you have to be self-affirmed, right? But at the same time, the biggest problem I have is the lies that I tell myself. You know what I mean? That I don't see myself. So, like a lot of times, I feel like, you know, so that it seems like there's a fine line between self-validation of truth and being self-deceived, you know, and how do you walk that?
Well, I see them two completely different things. If you're deceiving yourself, that's a job for self-inquiry and self-honesty. That doesn't, you know, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. Yeah, and it sounds like you do see that. Being self-affirmed is not being swayed by others, by being swayed by the opinions of others or the shoulds and oughts that society and parents and educators are putting on you. that you're not being swayed by that. You can be strong in the face of that and just be Mary Beth in the face of that and know that Mary Beth is a very flawed character. She deceives herself and whatnot, but that doesn't mean I should adopt a character that they're telling me, some sitcom character that I think looks better. To me, it's two completely different things.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of like with teachers in particular, or people, is it this? So when you're doing self-inquiry, I guess just knowing when, I guess I just don't always know the truth.
Well, that's true, but that doesn't really have an effect on being authentic in the world or being self-affirmed in the world. I am who I am, and what I am happens to be a very confused seeker. That's who I am. If you want to change how you pronounce something based on whether it's accurate or not, that's great. That's not what really the point of the story was. The point of the story was that, I am who I am and I don't care what you think.
Right. I do say Figiatus.
I'm sorry?
Figiatus. Figiatus.
No. Figiatus?
Yeah, but he does.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Go around and say that in a Mexican restaurant, or in golf. Sorry, Chai Rodriguez just sank a big putt. Noria.
So let me see. My understanding is that being self-affirmed and not giving a shit about what someone thinks doesn't mean you don't care about the person.
Oh no, not at all. You can love them to death.
Yeah. So
you don't let them change who you are through peer pressure or shoulds or oughts or anything like that. It's just being comfortable in your own skin and say this is the way I am. And I know the odds are against me, but I'm on my side. Who else do I need?
The paradox is when you're self-affirmed, then you can really care about something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're on solid ground.
Yeah.
Now you have something to offer. And not the least of which of what you have to offer is an example of what it's like to be self-affirmed and self-honest and authentic.
Yeah. Good.
This might be a little non sequitur, but I'm moving on here. My question is, do you think that we are characters in a play that we haven't written? And if so, does it matter? Do you think it matters what, as characters we are, what we do in order to wake up or be?
It matters a little bit.
In what way? Could you be more specific?
Well, I was just talking about all the different things that
I got the list.
that a character could do to try to facilitate self-realization, realizing that one has very little leverage over whether it ever happens or not.
Is that list your character? Is that list that you gave us, is that your character speaking?
Oh, of course.
Is your character speaking about your list and your...
Oh, yeah.
And so,
what else could it be?
But my question is, according to you, then it does make a difference a little bit as to what your character does in terms of waking up.
Yes. I think in the.
But you can only speak to yourself, not to other characters, just to you.
Yeah. What else can you do? And if you're talking about this kind of stuff, basically you're re-engineering or reverse engineering what you were doing on the path. There's nothing else that I can kind of talk about with any kind of confidence. All teachers, they're basically teaching what they did. They don't have any other way to really talk about it. This is what, basically, whether they say it or not, the underlying notion is, this is what I did, maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. And there's nothing else that you can do. If you get off into something else, then you're not speaking your own truth. Then you're not really offering anything that can't be found in books or from the teacher that first said it or anything like that. This is basically putting some kind of an organization to the kinds of things that occurred to me on my path, and after, in the aftermath of an occurrence, trying to cobble together, connect some dots that can't possibly be connected, but connect some dots in one way that it might communicate a potential path to others. And then your job is to take this and 100 other things that you hear and make up your own mind, assume authority, and take from this, 1% or 0%, and from other things as much as you want. You're the authority on whether this resonates or whether it doesn't. There's nothing else I can talk about except my own experience. Not with accuracy.
Could you talk about why prayer is all you need?
Ask and ye shall receive. I mean, but the big problem is how to ask and how to receive. What's the right way to ask, and how do I prepare myself to receive? How do I become accident prone? How do I become vulnerable to grace? How do I prepare myself to receive without the thought that I'm not worthy, I haven't put in enough time, I have some questions first, I'm afraid? All these things that are holding it back. God, if we can use that word, they say, knock and it shall be opened. Well, that's true. But God is also knocking. The door opens from the outside, the inside. We got our hands and feet against the door saying, I'm not ready. The gift is on constant offer. 24/7, 365, the gift is being offered. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Well, I got this job, and I got this girlfriend, and she doesn't really like it that I'm doing this, and can I keep her? We got questions, we got caveats, we got our foot on the door saying I'm not ready. But if you take your foot off the door and say, I want it no matter what, I am all in, I am praying for this, and I am asking, and I want to receive, and I'm prepared to receive, and you really are prepared to receive because you've done the work, whatever that entailed, whatever it took to prepare you to receive, you've done that work. Then, when you ask, you will receive like that. Rose famously said, if your whole life is a prayer, it will be answered instantaneously. And also the implication was a prayer for one thing. And so it's that simple. Simplicity. It's that simple. But we make it a lot more complex and force yahoos like me to give talks about 50 different things that make up a list, when it's really only one. Ask and you shall receive, but learn how to ask. How do you ask, and how do you receive? How do you be prepared to receive?
With regards to this, when you pray, who is listening? You said the universe, the source, the God that you believe in. Is this creating separation from me and who I am asking for?
It doesn't matter who.
The fact that you ask and receive from who or from what?
Yeah, I mean,
So it's separate?
the back of the book answer is you're praying to your higher self. You're praying to yourself. But that's not helpful when you're doing it. It's beneficial to make that artificial separation so you can have somebody to talk to. You are praying, ultimately you're praying to your higher self. But if people say, well, if I'm just praying to myself, why bother? I must know what I want. But it's the mechanism. You're putting yourself in the proper perspective. The character, the ego identity is putting itself in the proper place, and that is subservient to the higher self. Whether you want to identify as that yet or not, you are subservient to that which truly can make it happen. We all know, I didn't do this. You didn't do this. Something else did this. The little guy, the small s self, did not do this and has no power whatsoever to grant realization on itself. So however you want to, whatever kind of false dichotomy you want to create so that you can communicate with the highest power that you can possibly imagine that does have the power to make this happen.
Or not, because there are prayers that are
Or-
not answered.
Or not? Pardon me?
Or can answer, there has the power to, but there are also prayers that are not answered, and people are frustrated. They feel like they've been praying rightly.
Well,
They don't come true. So the answer to the prayer not necessarily has to do with the intention of the person who is prayer, because it seems like the superior being or the entity has different plans some of the time.
well, absolutely. And if you're praying for something that's not in your best interest, you won't get it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times that I've wanted something and didn't get it and looked back and said, God, thank God I didn't get that. You know, what was I thinking? You know, I mean, I'm not smart enough to know what's good. Bart's not smart enough to know what's good for me. That's where betweenness comes in, and that idea of, this is what I want, but if you don't want it for me, or if it's not good for me, or if I'm being an idiot here by asking for it, then please don't give it to me. I want to let you know this is what I want, but that's why it's such a razor's edge to walk. But the very fact that it's difficult to find that razor's edge and to walk it, that's probably where the power is. You're having to find a way to resolve all these paradoxes and all these apparent contradictions. And that's probably what's doing you the most good while you're in this state of prayer.
What I'm asking is, I am asking this question because I feel like I'm at a point in my life in which I don't feel like I have control on anything. That life pretty much dictates. It comes.
Yeah.
And you live it and you respond to it, at the point that you are in it.
Yeah.
So if I pray or not pray, it's independently of what life is making.
Well, things are going to come no matter what, one way, and sometimes they're in alignment with your desires, and sometimes there aren't. But with the times that they aren't in alignment with your your conscious desires, they're still in your best interest. It's still what had to happen. So I'm not really talking about navigating your daily life with prayer. You get in a new car or a new boyfriend or anything like that. I'm just talking about it in connection with self-realization, which is, it's over and above everything else. And it's basically implicit in that prayer is, I don't care what else happens in my life. One prayer that I think is a very powerful prayer is, whatever stands between me and truth, take it from me. And so if you pray that prayer with all your heart and you're all in, hang on to your hat. It could be a bumpy road. And a lot of things could happen in your life. They don't have to, but you have to be prepared for things to happen in your life that are not in alignment with some of your sub-prayers that you thought you wanted. Something has to be taken out of your life in order to get your primary desire.
So what determines what is my best interest?
You don't know. We don't know. We don't know. The divine knows, which is you. It's your capital S self knows. But if you're not in direct contact with your capital S self, you don't know. You can intuit a lot of times we can intuit things. Say, well, that's that looks really attractive, but you know what? It probably wouldn't do me any good if I went that direction. It's got a lot of glitz and it's got the brass ring to it, but you know what? That's not in alignment with some of the things that I really want a lot more. And so sometimes you do know what's not in your best interest, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you very earnestly want something that's not in your best interest. And thank God you won't get it. Thanks.